how do you get a boat or a ship into a bottle that seems only just large enough to hold it? You don't do it by cutting the bottle. Today, we're going to show you how you do it. We can't show you all the steps, it would take too long, but we can show you the principles. You could try it for yourself. Well, this is a large model of the sort of boat that you might want to bottle. And you see that it really is a model in the true sense. It's got all the ropes pretty well where they ought to be on a real sailing ship. There are those that hold the mast up, there are those that hold the sails, and most of them are leading down to the bowsprit. And in bottling ships that's important because you want as many ropes as you can to come through the bowsprit. That's the last part to go into the bottle, and you can control the ship with all the ropes that come through there. The other thing you should notice is the base of the masts. They've got a wire stirrup through them, and that means that each mast can be dropped backwards, as if on a hinge. That's very important, otherwise you couldn't get it into the neck of the bottle. The sails are glued on in part here, but not fully, because if you glue them on, you couldn't collapse the ship. So they're glued on at the top, but not at the bottom. And so in the end, if we take the cotton off this T-junction, which is there ready to keep everything under control without filling with the boat too much, let me just undo those threads. You notice that those masts drop backwards, like that, and because the sails aren't fully glued on, we can take them like that, wrap them around the boat, and if we took the boat off its frame and gathered up those sails, twisting them sideways, we'd be able to poke that through a much narrower hole than the erected boat would suggest. Well, that's the principle. This is the boat that we're going to bottle. It's a tiny model brig, and you can see that the sails are set. There's square sails on there. There are triangular stay sails in the middle. The only sails missing are those at the front. They're going to be glued on when the thing's in the bottle because we couldn't collapse it with the sails in place. But I'm now going to collapse it, and we'll see if we can get it into the bottle. So, here goes. And back to ship bottling. You can see my once lovely sailing ship is now a chaotic mess, but it's not as chaotic as it might at first appear. I've done several things. I've dropped the masts backward on their hinges, I've loosened all the ropes, and now I can turn all these square sails sideways, so instead of jamming across a bottleneck, they should be able to feed into it. Now all those ropes could present a terrible tangle, except that I've bound them together and I've kept labels on them all. I know which rope is which. Green is starboard, red is port. I sort of know where I am there. I just mustn't get them tangled under any circumstances. Well, now I think we're due for the big test. Let me hold it together. A third hand would be very nice indeed, but we'll just see what we can do. We mustn't crumple the sails, mustn't force it, which would break little sticks, and we mustn't tangle the ropes. But I think we're ready to see if we can get it inside. Hold your breath, and here goes. Very gently easing it in there, curving the sails, not forcing them, and when we get to a tight bit, instead of pushing, just gently wiggle and see if we can get it through. And you can see that's the toughest bit there, but lo and behold, that crumpled collection slides inside the bottle and it's there. Now I've judged that, I think, fairly nicely by measuring it beforehand. I should now be able to get everything to stand up again by pulling the right ropes, but you can see that if I pull on these, the bottle is just going to yield up its ship again. So I have to get the ship to stay there, and I can do it in two ways. First of all, I can make the plasticine see by taking off lumps of this greeny blue plasticine and wedging the boat in there, but there's not much for the plasticine to stick onto in a bottle of this kind. It's probably better, in a case like this, to stick the boat down with glue. Stick it onto the side, wait till the glue's set, pack the plasticine around it, and then, with the boat securely fixed, I can pull whatever strings I like. So that's what I'm going to do next. Well, I left the little model brig gluing to the side of its bottle, and I can't disturb it for a while, so we continue with this. It's a topsail schooner, but it's done in exactly the same way. You can see I've glued it to the bottle as well. In fact, I glued an ice cream stick there first to get a really good bond with the glass, and the boat is glued to the other side of that. But the net result is it's held very securely indeed, and around it I've packed the plasticine C. Now, ship bottlers make a lot of their own tools, and this is a C maker, and with it you can take little plasticine balls. You can colour the plasticine to whatever colour you like, grey for stormy seas or green for nice tranquil seas. And by wedging these balls on the end of the tool, you can introduce that into the neck of the bottle and press it down all over the floor of the bottle, or the side of the bottle. The net result, you can see, is a sort of dimpled surface that looks rather like the surface of a wavy sea. And it's going to be finished off with little bits of white plasticine that will make it look like white caps, and a bit of white in the wake of the ship as well. But now, with everything securely fixed there, I can afford to pull on the strings with some strength, and I'll need to, because as those masts hinge down, pulling the right strings will make them hinge up again. Well, I've got them all labelled. This is the one I want. It runs through the bowsprit, so by pulling on it from the outside of the bottle, you can see that it will erect the foremast. Up it comes. Now, about this stage, I'll probably need to introduce some sticks and disentangle the sails, because they get mixed up with the rigging. But because everything was right when it went into the bottle, it shouldn't be too hard to disengage. There we go, and that's the foremast erect and everything's tight. Now, of course, you can't let the tension slacken off on these strings, so you have to take them to the outside of the bottle and secure them either with sticky tape or with a rubber band. With that foremast in place, I can then pull the rest of the strings, bring the mast behind it up. I can then tighten up these cords with the sails on them, and if I keep going like that, you can see that the ship will erect itself inside the bottle and it'll be pretty well right. Now, of course, once I've got it to there, I have to glue everything up. This sail, for example, should be straight. I'll just disengage that. It should, in fact, be attached to the spar underneath it, so by pushing down on there, I can get that spar in place, get the sail in front of it, with little dobs of glue, stick everything into place. This is fiddly, and it takes a while, but you can see how it's done. The sail at the back, similarly, has to be glued to the spar above it, and that is simply something you have to do with fiddles. In the end, though, you've got these ropes coming out of the neck of the bottle, and they have to be removed. So by pulling everything up and tensioning it, and finally applying glue just where they run through the bowsprit and letting it dry, you can then cut the ropes off at the bottom of the bowsprit. If anything goes wrong, heaven help you, it's too late to dismantle the whole thing. But there's no reason why it should if you take care and patience. And this is the sort of thing you can end up with. That's actually a schooner, placed in a medicine bottle. And you can see it's really about as large as the inside of the bottle. Bottling ships, in fact, isn't as old a custom as people often think. It only goes back to about 150 years, to the time when mass-produced bottles became available, and they were used by sailors to protect these very delicate models that they made, often in months at sea, to relieve the boredom. It was also traditional often to put in something like a lighthouse or a little wharf scene. And by making it a lot smaller than the ship, even though this is only a centimetre behind it, it looks as if it's a couple of miles off in the distance. Perspective helps in there. Well, there's a little schooner leaving port, and this one, with a similar lighthouse, is a little cutter about to set out for the open sea as well. Well, that looks difficult, and it's harder than it looks. But if you want to try it, have a go. And when you think you've mastered that art, try putting one into a bottle like this.